Hello everyone, my name is Barbara and I would like to welcome you all to our latest Novedge webinar episode. In this week's episode, drum roll, Modo 801, the latest release of the Foundry's award-winning 3D animation and asset creation software. Presenting this webinar is Greg Brown, a Modo Creative Specialist at the Foundry. Greg has worked in advertising and print media as a 3D artist for more than 8 years. Before we get going with this presentation, here's an overview at what we do at Novedge. Novedge is one of the largest online design software stores, and we offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's need. Put us to the test and come visit us at our webpage at www.novedge.com. And if you need to get Modo and you live outside the US or Canada, visit the Foundry's website at www.thefoundry.co.uk. In Novedge, we also curate a very helpful blog with the latest software informations and the best interviews. This week, for instance, we interview Phil Tippett. I'm sure many of you know him. He is the master behind the original Star Wars VFX and the man who feathered most of the Star Wars alien creatures. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Find us on your favorite social media and don't miss another webinar or event ever again. Coming up next week, creating a building without walls in Vectorworks with Vectorworks writer and presenter Jonathan Pica. Design the buildings you want by modeling with Vectorworks 2014. Jonathan will share his 3D modeling techniques for drawing up building elevation sections and plans. Last but not least, today's presentation is free and is being recorded live. If you want to rewatch this or any webinar episode, you can find it on our YouTube and Vimeo channel under the name Novedge. And now I'm going to let Greg lead the webinar and Modo dazzle us. Feel free to punch in your question at any time in the question box, and we will address as many as we can at the end of the webinar presentation. So Greg, are you ready?
Yep, most definitely.
I'm going to make you the presenter, and let's get the show rolling. Okay, enjoy everybody. See you at the end.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Okay, so first off, as you all know, we're going to be showing some of 801 here, and that's one of the things I want to clarify, is that unfortunately, because we've got about 45 minutes of real demo time here, we're not going to be able to get through everything. And let me just, before we go forward, point out some stuff in our docs. And if you'll notice, here in our 801 documentation, we have a list of every feature inside of Modo 801, which, as you can see, is pretty tremendous. We're very proud of this release. And one of the things that we're proud of is that while Modo is a very, very broad app, we're still capable of tailoring for individual industries. So before I go into showing you a small portion of those features that I just kind of showed you the web page for, we have, for modeling, we have a new snapping workflow, new UDIM workflow to quickly bring in multiple UDIMs from applications like Mari. New shattering glue command for, or shatter command for meshes so that you can run dynamic simulations. UV symmetry, merge UVs, transform normals, clay brush, polyline. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to run through all these so quickly, otherwise I'll spend half the demo time just telling you, what each feature is in 801. Edge extend tool, slip UV state, polygon freeze. Let me just let you see these while I'm going through them. Polygon type UI indicator, handle tooltips, nodal shading. Nodal shading in 801 is incredible, and I'll touch on that in this demo. New types of shading nodes. You can actually, we have a new type of raycast node where you can actually determine what happens when a ray hits a surface. Really amazing stuff. MCIC hybrid rendering, which allows you to use interpolated GI with Monte Carlo to speed up your renders, but then also preserve the quality. New shader types. Frame passes and depth of field. So you can add depth of field to your frame passes and actually have it iteratively add more sampling to the depth of field. New render output support. So we have new render outputs so that when you go into an application such as Nuke, you have more things available to you. Additional controls and caching options for OpenEXR, Vertex Irradiance Cache, which is a new rendering option, Surface Generator, Preview Enhancements, Render Output, and look at that. All we've gone through is modeling and rendering. So please, by all means, go through this list, download a trial of 801. You'll have the documentation with it. And let's see if you can even get through all of these features inside of one single demo period, because lots and lots of stuff. All right, so one of the first things that I'm going to show you in 801 is some simple sculpting enhancements. And so let me come on over to that file. And if you want to actually see how many different demo files we have, my lord, look at that. It's absolutely incredible. And I'll open up a simple scene to sculpt on top of. And while we didn't have massive changes to our sculpting tool set in 801, we have some additions that are extraordinarily useful, specifically the clay brush, and also a new type of sculpting tool which is constrained to curve, which I find tremendously useful. So if I come on over to the paint and sculpting layout, and I just sculpt on top of this surface using the push brush, first off to show you this feature, I'm just going to go ahead and sculpt on the surface. We don't have any, we don't have quite enough strength there, so I'll raise it up to 30%. And using the push brush, you can see how I'm just raising the surface. And again, another one right over here. What the clay brush does is the clay brush will actually raise the surface based on the surface surrounding it. So since we have these two raised surfaces right here, as I stroke on top of this, you can see it actually raises the surface in between. So a very useful tool. And to kind of compare that to what happens if I were to use the push brush in the same location, you can see it doesn't respect those outer boundary surfaces, so you don't get as clean of a raise. So one nice new brush added to the sculpting tool set that makes life a lot easier for me, and I definitely enjoy using Modo's sculpting tools. Like I mentioned also, the constrain to curves. I have another layer with another multi-resolution mesh that's been taken a little bit further sculpting-wise, and also has a couple different curves that I've drawn on the surface. And if I go ahead and turn on my background constraints, I'm going to open up my modeling tool palette, come over to mesh constraints. Our background snapping locations have been changed. The organization of all of our snapping tools in general have been changed. I'll just turn on background and keep my geometry constraint type to point. And I can come on over here and open up my curve palette. And if I want to, I can actually create a new mesh layer, shut off my other curves because I really don't need them right here. And I could actually sketch curves on top of the surface to constrain too. So look right here, I'll go ahead and draw this curve right over the surface, as you can see. And now that I have that here, I can go ahead and add another, or actually come back to my low MRes mesh. And if I grab one of the sculpting tools, let me shut these down right here, like the push brush, I can come down to the curve constraint options, and I can set it to either background 3D or 2D. If you set it to 2D, it will actually respect whatever curve you have in the scene, even if it's floating in space, and will project from that location onto the surface if it's hovering over it. And in 3D mode, it respects the fact that it's constrained to the surface. And so curve constraints, background 3D, and come on over here. And as you can see, it grabbed that point. Even if I pull my brush up here, you see nothing happens, and it'll just continue. And so this makes it really easy to produce really nice, fine details. And for things like wrinkles and stuff, this is an absolute lifesaver, because I get to kind of like lay out my wrinkles ahead of time and decide, you know, where do I really want everything? I can use an image as a reference, you know, to actually sketch the curves on top of. And so it makes my life a lot easier being able to have these curve constraints options. There's some great videos on the website. Please, by all means, take a look at them, and we'll be able to take you through some features such as this even further. So let me just go ahead and close the scene on down. Next thing I want to show you is something that will apply to pretty much anybody in any industry that uses 3D, and that is UV tool updates. We have a lot of updates to our UV system, which I think is one of the best out there, and that makes life a lot easier, including UV symmetry, new unwrap options. I'll even give you a few hints as far as how to get good unwraps inside of Modo, because one of the things about Modo's UV tool set is it's not a one-click UV tool set, and the reason for that is you can make it a one-click UV tool if you want to. We have a whole lot of different UV tools available to you to use to actually produce perfect, gorgeous unwraps that you can control and manage. You're not locked to a single, you know, pelting option, essentially. And so now that that mesh is all loaded up, I have a terrible habit of having very dense scenes. So please bear with me while this scene actually loads up, because I have all my different sculpt layers in here. You see I have this character hero here. I'm actually even displaying GL fur inside here, and if you'll notice down here, I have over 5 million polygons in the scene as a whole. Now I'll shut off all those different layers, and I'll come down to a base mesh to actually do some of my unwrap options, and let you guys see the wireframe really quickly. Go ahead and toggle that on, and then come over to our UV tab. If you'll notice, if you're not familiar with Modo at all, one of the things about Modo is the first time you jump in, you'll see this tabbed layout structure, and you'll be in the model layout first. Now, what you want to do now is come over to the UV tab, and I'll go ahead and center my object on the selection, and go ahead and come over to Edge Component Mode. When you want to unwrap a mesh, you select one edge after another, and you actually define where you want to unwrap from, a very typical method for unwrapping UVs. And if I come over to my unwrap tool, I want to point out that we have two new methods of unwrap, that being conformal and angle-based. And if I unwrap my mesh, you can see it does a good job of unwrapping, but we get this red area right here, and that's because it's trying to seal holes. And so all I got to do is turn that off, and I get this nice, beautiful, clean unwrap quickly and easily. And if I switch on over to angle-based, you can see I get a slightly different unwrap. And if I want to see this more clearly, I can go ahead and turn on my UV map right here so I can actually watch as I'm unwrapping. And so go ahead and run that one more time in conformal mode, and go ahead and switch that on over to angle-based. Now, one thing that really bugs me about this UV map right here is I don't have symmetry with this UV map. This is something that in the past you had to jump through some hurdles to get symmetry, and we've added UV symmetry to the UV tool set, a very robust form of UV symmetry to the tool set. First off, before I go any further, if you'll notice, I have my background constraints on right now, so my mistake. I should probably turn those off so I don't run into any sort of problems. But again, unwrap tool, click in the viewport, it's unwrapping, and all I have to do is click on symmetrize, and there we go. It will actually symmetrize my UVs. Now, I have some objects that are not symmetrical in here, so if you want to just isolate the symmetry, go ahead and hide those away. Just run the unwrap on this object only, and I need to get back my selection, so I can just select my UV border, unwrap tool, click in the viewport, and there we go. We got beautiful, perfect UV symmetry straight from the start. Now, these unwrap methods are also part of the UV relax tools. And like I mentioned earlier, our UV tools are not necessarily a one-click solution because you can make a one-click solution. You can take multiple tools and put them together as a macro. And so right here, you can actually record a macro of multiple tools being put together. In fact, in the forums, I have a macro for pelting, actually, called the Uber Pelter scripts. And so if you guys hop into the community forums for the Foundry after this, I'll supply you guys with that macro if you want to play around with it inside of 801. But we have conformal modes for relax. I want to take off my selection, hit the UV relax tool, see my iterations that are at 0, and see this will allow me to relax it in a conformal mode or in the angle-based mode. And I can actually, for the UV relax options as well, go ahead and turn on UV symmetry, which it respects during the relaxing process. You can see that by using the relax tool, we can actually get beautiful, beautiful unwraps. My favorite one is the adaptive mode, which is one that we've had for quite a while. But you combine the conformal unwrap with the adaptive UV relax, and it's incredible the quality that you can achieve just by putting these few tools together as a macro. So you do have a one-click solution. And so let me go ahead and set that to, say, 2,000 iterations. And for this, since it's doing it 2,000 times, it'll take a few seconds for it to finish relaxing, but there you go, even better unwrap than before. And just to kind of take this a little bit further and show you something extremely cool, the UV Relax tools, this is something we've had for quite a long time. I want to go into regular old conformal mode, and I want to set interactive, and I just want to save my constraints just for the sake of it. Constraints in Modo's UV tools are, like I said, something we've had for quite a while, but I really like being able to point this out to people because a lot of people don't understand how to use the constraints. Oftentimes people will constrain the outer edge of a UV map, but when you think about it, you really probably don't want to constrain just the outer edge, right? You probably want to use constraints like you would rigging something. So I'll go ahead and lay down a point right there and lay one right here and right here. And as I do that, you see I pull on up, nothing happens. That's because I have my iterations too low. But what this will allow me to do is it'll allow me to actually tweak and tune my UV map as I'm unwrapping it. I want my iterations higher, and you can see how it actually allows me to go ahead and continue modifying it. And it also, and that one dropped right there. I probably need to do some more tweaking. Generally, it respects symmetry. But like, what about the nose? Like, I'll just go ahead and drop a constraint right there at the nose. Come right on in here and go ahead and move that on around. And so there we go. Amazing ways of being able to tweak and tune your UV. So I expect with 801 to see a lot of people doing some amazing UV work. Now you also can add symmetry back to your UV tools and to your maps. So if you have any maps from the past that don't have symmetry, or like this one that somehow lost it because I probably did something wrong, you can go ahead and add that back with symmetrized UV. So I'll select my center axis right here, and I'm going to go ahead and set my position. So edit UVs, and thank you, Modo, for auto-saving for me. It's a lifesaver, but every single time I do a demo, it gets in the way. All right, so edit UVs, set value, set that to 0.5 along U, and then come over to symmetrize UVs, and I want to go negative to positive. And there you go. It just added symmetry back in, as you can see right here. So thank God we have wonderful symmetry tools for our UVs, making your guys' lives so much easier. All right, so let me close this scene on down. And the next thing we're going to get onto is fur and hair sculpting inside of 801. This is something that one of our developers, Gregory Duquesne, spent quite a bit of time on, and I absolutely love him for it because he's significantly improved our hair sculpting tools. They're incredibly fast and fluid and can be used in some really interesting ways. In fact, we're going to come back to the hair sculpting at the end because I want to show you the beginnings of a new hair sculpting workflow that I'm working on that actually allows you to sculpt volumes to produce your hairstyles. And this is a workflow that's going much further than what I'm going to show you, but still definitely want to be able to show you that. So let me come on over to my Spotlight videos right here, because if you pick up our demo, that is the production evaluation. It costs $25, but it comes with all of these assets and videos that you see here in the Spotlights section. And so you can actually use some of the files that we use and also have some guidance via video. I believe it's over 3 hours of video that comes with that. So 3 hours of tutorials for $25, and makes your life a lot easier. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say, no, I think I'm going to have my image. All right, great. It's already opened to the right location. I swear I saved over that again. All right, so now I'm going to want to come back over to my painting and sculpting layout. And again, I have a very dense scene that I'm working with because I tend to like to push scenes as far as I possibly can. If I come back over to the painting and sculpting layout, that's where you're going to find all of our hair sculpting tools. And as you can see, I have a very complex hairstyle here that I created inside of Modo. I have over 4,000 guides in this layer. But it starts out really simple when you go into fur and hair sculpting because we have so many new tools here underneath the hair tools to actually generate more and more guides. It allows you to go through an iterative process of creating hairstyles like this. And if I come back one step to the 1K skull cap that I have right here, this will allow me to kind of show you what one stage earlier looks like. This is how it looked, about a couple hours earlier during the whole hair sculpting process. But this layer has about 1,000 guides, and I was able to use freeze GL guides to fur, which is one I'm going to show you in a second, to actually add extra guides to the hairstyle that I've created. Because when you create hairstyles, you want to make sure you have a very dense set of guides to define that style, because that allows you to create master and secondary clumping groups. So let's quickly go through a variety of the tools on a blank skull cap that I have right here, so I can actually show you the process of creating these guides. Now, we've had hair tools for quite some time now, and the way that you used to actually grow guides is just with the Create Guides tool, Mode Generate, and we still have that option, and you just click and drag in the viewport, and there we go. I'm making lots and lots of hair guides that are being scattered across the surface. I can change the max number of guides, but this is kind of a challenging way of sculpting hair because you've got all these guides in place and none of them are really doing exactly what you want. And so what I like to do is, especially in the case of the new tools, is I'll go in and I'll select, say, for instance, one vertex, and I'm like, you know what, that's going to be where I'm starting with the hair. I want to actually make that little flip-up area. And I can go ahead and create guides, grow that on out, play around with things like the bend amount, and I really don't want any bend amount, and I'll pull that on back, and now I've created my first guide. And also, I'm going to cut and paste this back into place because it'll still stay constrained to its original location as I'm working on this. And if I grab the move brush, I can go ahead and tweak, intune, and move this guide into place. And at this point, I need to have more guides, and I also need to edit this one because that's way too long for an initial hair strand. And I'll go ahead and say, for instance, change the length via size, and I'll just pull that on down a little bit. And I can use tack guides to start adding more guides to my hair because I'm pretty far away from having a hairstyle at this point. And so I can press Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste, and then I can just drag my guide over the surface, which has now been duplicated. Maybe come back over to the Move tool and tweak and tune that one guide. And see, it allows me to lay out the structure of my hair. And one of the things I really like to do is I like to actually go ahead and use a mesh in the background to guide me on the process of creating my hairstyle. So I quickly sculpt out a shape for my hairstyle, and then I use that as reference. And you can also use our viewport shading options where make inactive settings active. Probably don't want that right now, and this way I can actually have the background object just showing as a wireframe only. And you can also set independent display options. And so I'll go ahead and turn that one off right now, and or this one, come back over here. And we'll go ahead and duplicate this one more time and use the Tack Guides tool and bring that right on up here. And I want this guide to actually push forward ever so slightly. And so pull that on down, pull it on back. And you can see it's very interactive, but I do only have 3 guides right now. And the way that you add more and more guides, because you can imagine I'd grow a guide here, 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 just to rough things out, and then on the back of the head, and then start establishing the side, and probably have a total of 20, 30 guides in total to start off with before I came over and used the Create Guides tool again with the Interpolate option. And I absolutely love the Interpolate option because now I can click right in the viewport, and you see you get these highlighted blue roots. And that tells you it's interpolating the shape of the guides based on the guide surrounding. And hold down the Shift key to start adding more and more guides across your mesh. And so now that I have this all set up, I can continue, again, using the Move tool to edit all these different guides together and really get a very complex hair shape very quickly. And so it's like, for instance, get to this like 1K skull cap over here that I'm turning on right now. It took me probably something along the lines of like 30, 45 minutes to get to this point. Now, one of the things that we also added for the hair tools is new GL for display options. And if I come on down to my shader tree and I open up the actual hair itself, so there we go, hair, we've got a couple different ones here, all right. Excuse me, I think I've got the wrong one. Well, if you're having trouble finding your materials, you can go ahead and select that with the material option. And okay, great, thank you. It is this hair right here. And I can actually edit the GL for display options in our fur material. So if I come down here to the bottom, you can see I have set tip color and root color, and that's showing up here, which is allowing me to better display the fur itself. And I also, since I have this layer selected, I can set my guide color and override that if that's a little bit too glaring because you can't actually see the hair that's being generated here. But if you don't want that, you can go ahead and turn that off, and now we can actually see the 1,000 guides that are present here and use things like I showed you just before, the Interpolate Guides option to go ahead and start laying down extra hairs. And you can see how quick this is. I'm just holding down the Shift key, and it's adding more and more and more density to my hairstyle, which allows you to finally move on to this 4K skull cap that you see right here, which, I mean, is extremely complex. But this allows you to achieve master and secondary clump groupings, which is a very challenging thing to do in hair sculpting. And so by all means, if you guys want to learn more about the hair sculpting in general, hop into the forums. I'll help you through that, and we'll also, like I said, touch on this a little bit later because I'm putting together another new workflow that involves sculpting up polygons that allows you to control very complex hairstyles, because this is one of those things that just drives people nuts. I mean, you spend way too much time trying to figure out, what kind of shapes, what kind of volumes you want to create. I think I made that a little bit easier with this new tool. Now, you can also assign sets. So this is something that's extremely important in that when you have this many guides, you really need to be able to group everything into sets. So if I want to assign a set, go ahead and assign that, name it whatever I want to name it, and I can go ahead and use set, select this, and we have auto hide options. And also, if I want to actually have my fur material showing, display inside the viewport, I'll raise that right on back up. Take a few seconds for that to update because the display density is extremely high. Having a lot of hair guides can be taxing on your system, but we wanted to make sure that you were capable of having that hair displayed as you sculpted. So we have deferred for update right here. And what that lets me do is it allows me to sculpt the hair, as you can see right here, and then let go of it. And then after I let go, it's going to update the actual hair guides and move the fur into place. But with a dense set of guides, may not be exactly the workflow you want. So really great that we kind of give you that option. I'm going to go ahead and leave that enabled. And I'm going to come back over to my blank skull cap right here and show you one more, and that is the Sketch Guides tool, which is just awesomely cool. Like, if there's a new Seuss movie, I don't know if there is or not, they should definitely be using Modo's hair sculpting tools to design the hair, because you can just draw a guide off the surface, and there we go, a nice swirly hairstyle, and now I've actually got essentially Seuss hair in place. And go ahead and drop that tool right there. And if I turn on my blank skull cap options, you'll actually see fur material. You should be able to see the display right there. I'll go ahead and reassign this material so you can actually see that. And come up to blank skull cap. And add a new fur material right here. And now that fur material shows up on the surface. Just need to set my guides over to range and establish exactly which mesh I actually want to use for this. So I believe we are on the blank skull cap 2. I'm going to come on over here. Yep, item list, it is, oh, I want to use blank skull cap 2. There we go. And I've got absolute craziness here. Lots and lots of fur all over the place. Probably want to bring my range down to something like 15 millimeters. And there we go. We're actually having that fur initially drawn. And if it's just too rough like that, there's a couple tricks. Like you want to set the max number of segments much higher. You see as you raise this to, say, 32 or 64, you get much tighter distribution. And for kink options, this is one that a lot of people don't know about, is if you're having trouble with your hairstyles, you want to actually kill all the fur kink options and then add them back later so you have more management. But watch this. This is just so cool. Like, again, I'll just grab the Sketch Guides tool, drag off the surface, and because of deferred for update, nothing will happen, and I can go ahead and edit this location, move that on over there, drop the tool, and then there's my hair. And again, use the tack tool to tack that into place, and as I move it over, it doesn't update until I do it. So absolute craziness as far as how all the hair sculpting tools have been implemented. Loving it. All right, so let me go ahead and close this scene on down, and let's move on to a few more goodies like baking. Now, baking is something that we actually have really good baking technology, but the way that we were implementing some of that wasn't exactly right. In fact, we have a new baking toolkit, which is essentially a plug-in, which will even streamline things for you guys further, but it's not actually part of 801, so we're not going to quite go through that. But I'll show you some of the nice new technology, for instance, like cage baking that we've added. So actually, to do that, I'll come on over to my demo files and open up the baking options. I really like the way that we implemented cage-based baking, because what I find with baking in general is it's something that you usually don't do just once. It's something that you usually do a couple times to get the right results. And so if I wanted to bake this object, and if I turn off my low poly version, because this one is low poly, and come over to my high poly bake from object, if I want to actually bake this form, I'm probably going to go through the process of adding, my mesh and then kind of seeing how well it baked, where the problem areas are, and editing it. So to actually cause this object to use a cage, the way you do that is through morphs. Morphs are a lot like blend shapes. Oh, excuse me, I completely killed that. And let me just go ahead and open this back up. Morphs are a lot like blend shapes, and what it is, though, is it's a blend shape that is stored as a vertex map. And really, to kind of articulate this really clearly, let's just do something somewhat challenging like bake a cube, because without cage baking, it's very hard to bake a cube that has beveled edges onto a low polygon cube. And if I turn on my wireframe, you can see how much geometry I have there. And I'll go ahead and create another cube here, which will become my bake 2 cube. You can see what I want to do is I want to bake from this object right here to this object from the other one. So I'll go ahead and name this raw, cube, and come over to my lists, morph maps, create a new morph, go ahead and name that whatever you want, and model, deform, and push tool, and push this off the surface, because now it's a morph map. And see, as I toggle this off and on, it's actually holding on to that data. So this way, if I decide I don't like the bake that I've actually produced, I can go ahead and edit that in the actual sickle that I showed you just before. I ended up finding out that I really didn't want the blade pushed off very far, but I wanted the whole pole area pushed off really wide. So this allowed me to go back in there, kill the morph just on the blade itself, and then rebake. I got exactly what I wanted. And so come over to the shader tree, and let's add a normal map. So I'll go ahead and create a new image, and we'll just name that again, whatever, and 1024, why not change its type to normal. And all I have to do to bake this now is right-click on top of it, bake from object to texture. And you see now we have this option, cage. I can either set the distance for my bake or use the cage, select morph, and now I'm actually baking out that normal map. And you can see that if I turn off my background object, I can bake a beautiful beveled cube onto a hard edge surface, and of course go ahead and adjust the smoothing on this object too to make that the bake even better. But this is something that you couldn't do previously, and I think is massively, massively useful. All right, so another thing about the baking is oftentimes people want to bake to a render or an actual render output, capture lighting and information and things of that sort. And now underneath our render options, you can actually set your baking width and height. Previously, it would automatically bake to the frame size you set. And so if you had a render going that was a completely different size, which it usually is, because it's usually it's not a square size usually when you're rendering, you'd have to go ahead and change that on over, and then bake it, and then change the render resolution again when you wanted to see how it rendered. But now you can set the baking width and height so that this is something that's done behind the scenes. You don't have to go in and alter all sorts of stuff within your scene. So lots and lots of great stuff within the baking tools. All right, so let me go ahead and close this scene on down. And all right, now next thing I want to get on to is some simple dynamics. And I'm going to actually first off open up one of our actual demo scenes to show this to you. And that is for dynamics. We have a couple new things. One thing we have is dynamic replicators. This is awesome. You can use our replicator system and actually assign dynamics based on the shape of the mesh that's attached to the replicator system. And we also have shattering glue. And shattering glue it's incredibly fun. If you go and download the demo, I highly suggest that you actually play around with the shattering glue option. I have a couple tests I was doing in the work in progress section in our forums of, oh God, how many objects was it? It was something like 60,000 objects shattered, and actually running the simulation with it. But what this lets you do is, I'll just show you the result of the shatter here, is shatter any form or object and it'll actually glue everything together. And so if I come up to our setup tab, that's where we do all of our dynamics and rigging and stuff like that. And I just go ahead and press play because we've already cached the simulation that we have here. And press play, you can actually see the deterioration and how everything's interacting with one another and with the ground. We also have a particle simulation that's running at the same time, because every single object that is falling off is also casting out particles. So you can actually create very complex, very volumetric particle style effects along with shatter and glue. And just to kind of show you how easy this is to set up, because that's something that we are very big on, is trying to make the user experience pleasant, especially for people coming over from other applications who are new to Modo. We want to make sure you can do all this stuff really easily. Here in the setup section is dynamics, and I'm going to go ahead and create just a regular old plane, which I'll zoom in on here. All right, so there's my plane, and I'll scale it on out so we have something a little bit larger. And I'm also going to create a sphere, and there's my sphere. All right, pull that right on up. And what I want is I want to shatter this sphere, but I want to glue the pieces together so they only come apart when enough force has been applied to the shattered object. So first I'm going to select my plane because I want to create a dynamic simulation. So for the case of the ground, I'll just set that as a static rigid body, and that'll make it so that the object won't fall when I run my simulation. See, nothing's actually happening there. It's dynamic. It'll actually collide, or these objects will collide with it, but it won't fall itself. And now for this object right here, I could set it as an active rigid body, but we have a nice, easy way of shatter and glue. Now, your dynamic glue strength is going to come up, and what you probably want is to set that really low, like 0.01. And uniform, we'll set that to 30 shatter pieces. You can see it does a really nice job of shattering that. Now, you'll notice these red edges. That's something you're going to see in OpenGL, but you're not really going to see that inside the render view. And you can see that once it renders, those edges really don't show very much at all. And if I now go ahead and press the live simulation button, you can see everything is breaking apart. And it's like, well, you know what, that's all breaking apart a little bit too easily, because you can see everything is shattering apart, but it's staying together as it falls, so I am happy with that part of it all. But I can come over here to my sphere shards, grab all these objects, grab my dynamics options, pull this on up, and I can change my glue options down here. You can see my glue A is set to 1 CN. I'm going to change that to 10 and rerun the simulation. And now you can see that certain objects that didn't receive enough force are now staying glued together. And we'll just take that up a little bit higher still. I'm telling you, have some fun with this. Like make Jenga essentially, and start throwing things at it. Use dynamic replicators to just throw like thousands of spheres at it, and watch how these things fall apart. But you can see how nice and interactive this whole process is. And so even for creating even things like game assets with destruction, you can take our particle system and just fire particles at a wall that's been shattered and has glue on it, and have those particles chip away at it. And so it allows you to create really organic simulations that can aid even in the modeling process, which is extremely cool. But since everything's staying together, let's go ahead and change my impulse value to -4 along the y-axis. And now as this reruns, it's actually going to have more force applied. You can see more pieces broke off as I did that. And we'll go ahead and rerun this one more time. I don't want it to go all the way through, but there you go. Lots of force being applied and just breaks right apart. Now, like everything else that I was talking about earlier, we have lots and lots of stuff in 801. So even as far as dynamics is concerned, Eric will be the person who does this amazing job on these tools this time with 801. And we also have, as you can see here, dynamic curves as hair. The dynamic system in general is much more robust. I'm loving the soft bodies and even kinematic rigid bodies, which will allow your objects to interact with animation, which is obviously absolutely essential. So everything in Modo with 801 is just really being far more closely tied together, playing even more nicely than it did in the past. And that's one of our philosophies, is how everything in Modo plays nicely with everything else in Modo. But it's just really incredible how far things have come inside of 801. All right, so one of the next things I want to touch on is the node-based shading. I can't believe it's already 140. So we're just going to, or 140 for me. You poor fellows over there in Japan, what are you guys at, 340? Thank you so much for watching this. I'll come on over to a simple node-based scene that I have here. Martin did a much cooler one that is we can also provide you with, which actually shows ways to change the water level, which changes the amount of moss below the water because it's detecting the rays for refraction. Craziness. What I have here is I have an example of using node-based shading for actually creating seams on a surface. And this is something that was shown by one of our developers, Matt Cox, during the beta period, and I completely freaked out because I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. You can actually do this. You see, I've got this very simple seat right here, right? Nothing too crazy. But say you've created the seat, or you've gotten the seat even worse yet from, like, a freelancer, or worse yet, off of some site that you bought some cheap assets from, and it doesn't have any seams. And you're like, oh my God, that model looked awesome on the website, and now I'm looking at it, and I've got to model seams into it, right? Well, you can actually use curves. You see I have this curve layer up here that is constrained to the surface. Use our topology tools. Go in and start editing curves on top of the surface. So I'll come over to my curve layer, grab my topology pen, and start editing my curves constrained to the surface. Then come on over to the Setup tab. Setup tab is where we have our schematic view. And if you look right here, I have a simple node-based shading setup here. And if you guys want to go through more specifics, again, I have a video on this topic specifically. I'll also provide you with this file if you want to play around with it. But if you look at the shader tree is extremely simple right now. I didn't even create a new material right here because we're only dealing with one material. And all I've done is added two constants. And if I select this constant right here for bump, you can see right down here in the schematic view, there's that constant. And all these things that are happening here are dumping into that constant. And again, if I come up here for diffuse amount, same thing right there. And if I turn on the diffuse amount layer and I open up my render, you can see that it is now actually casting that coloration on top of the surface. And if I come on over to, say, adjust the settings for the actual constant itself, and let's come on over to kind of play around with this. For some reason I'm having trouble getting that. I can actually play around with the way that it's blending on top of the surface. Oh, I've got the wrong one here. And I could actually modify the color of that constant, things of that sort, to further modify the way that this is actually interacting. Oh, I've got diffuse amount, so that's why. So I'll change this over to diffuse color and come over to my texture layers. No, my constant was minimized. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and change that, basic diffuse amount. That's not quite working out. There we go. I can modify the intensity of that, or the value of that, which I'm not getting it because it's being pumped into there right now. But the bump itself is being driven by the same exact texture as the diffuse amount layer. And so really great ways of adding very complex effects really, really quickly and easily. And so there we go. There's that bump. Now check this out. This is all being controlled by a gradient. So if I go ahead and I select this and I decide I want to edit my gradient, you can actually see the profile that is producing this bump map. And I'm kind of blown away that this is just a bump map. That's all this is. It's also kind of imperfect. So I also want to come over to Model and Mesh Constraints, turn on my background constraints again, make sure that I have my curves item selected, because now I really want to make sure that I can have more density. And so there we go. I now have a little bit more density in my curves. You can see how much more well they are laying on top. But check this out. So if I go ahead and grab, I'm going to pull this off screen because I'm running out of space. Go ahead and grab that gradient. And go ahead and edit gradient. And I come over to its value options. For some reason, it is not opening up for me right now. Over here. There we go. Edit gradient. Check this out. I'm going to go ahead and select. All right. My Wacom driver is completely freaking out now. There we go. And the other timeline was playing while this is rendering. Awesome. All right, so I will go ahead and grab these points right here. And I've got all these keyframes selected, right? Again. And pull that on over and check that out. I can actually modify the way this is falling off. And we have all sorts of other tools that are from past versions of Modo, like things like texture replicators, which can be used on top of this to create really complex designs. And this is useful for designers in many, many ways. As far as defining clothing seams, oftentimes if you look at like some of the new superheroes and stuff, so much of their design is based on the seam arrangement of their clothing. And being able to go in and say, for instance, just slap on curves like I showed you before with the curve palette, go ahead and come back up to geometry and curve palette, and draw a curve on the surface, sketch it. Let's say it's my car, and I'm just tacky enough to actually put my initials on my headrest. I'll go ahead and, hold on, whoops. I have to G and B. Oh boy, that is so tacky, I swear to you. I would not do that ever. All I have to do is come over to my curve probe, and I want to make sure that my curve probe, curve ID, is set to -1, and this way, instead of just drawing this curve, it will draw every single curve inside that layer. And I also could set that on a negative value so it just pinched straight into the surface. And you can bake this out as a normal map, bake it out as a displacement, bake it out as a diffuse map. And I mean, it's like almost like a little mini 3D illustrator inside of Modo. And it wasn't even intended. The curve probe is something that was intended to be used for rigging, and it just plugged right in to our node-based shading, and it just worked. And thank God Matt Cox showed us all how to do it, because I'm not nearly as smart as he is, and I would not have figured this out on my own. But one thing I'm really excited about is seeing what people do with our node-based shading. I don't think we're going to see the end of its capabilities for many years, just because this is a system that users will exploit in tremendous, tremendous ways. All right, so let me just go ahead and close the scene on down, and I'll open up that other hair video. Oops. Well, that's okay, because it's closing it anyway. I'll open up this scene really quickly to show you something really cool that is in the very beginnings of kind of development on my side of things. I really like to improve workflows. It's just something I'm really big on. And one thing about sculpting and hair sculpting that I think is really important is that the early stages be done with volumes and surfaces and sculpting on like polygons and stuff like that. So if I come on over to my katana demo down here, I'm going to show you what I did as far as developing a more complex hairstyle. There'll be a work in progress thread on this one very shortly, because I'm almost at a point where I'm actually ready to put up some renders of it. But you can see that I have those fur guides that are the GL fur display here. I actually was able to establish every single surface has a different color, so I could work with them separately. And I also was able to hide away the various mesh layers that compose this hair sculpting. See, these are all the different layers right here. And if I go ahead and pull this on down, I can use the Photoshop style layer visibility toggling so I can see all the different layers. Or if I want to have them off right now, which I find very useful just for management, if I come into polygon mode, select my object right up here, I can now cycle through these and decide, okay, which one do I want to edit? I'm not sure which one I want to grab, so I'll just go ahead and cycle through these. And all right, you know what? I want to grab this one. And check this out, right? I'm going to come into polygon mode. I'll select this one poly. You see how I have this mesh? What I've done is I've actually selected the vertices along its length and then press Shift+O, which creates a new open curve. And that creates all these curves here that are constrained to the surface. And so if I want to use just the regular old sculpting tools, I can come over here and say, for instance, Sculpt Tools, move. I was already there, wasn't I? I can go ahead and let's turn on wireframe so you can see this. Come into item mode so you can see it a little bit better. Turn that one on. Make sure that guy's selected. And actually just grab the entire polygon volume and start pulling it out and editing my hair guides this way. And I have a mesh that is at the source of this growth that the hair is growing from, and it's just respecting the curves beautifully, partly because of the fact that I've established the outer boundaries. All the fur is checking out all these guides and growing within those boundaries because they're all at the outer edges of the polygon that's growing them. And I'll open up my render preview very quickly and pull this on over here so you can see it. Renders really fast. I have a skin shader turned on for no good reason, really, other than the fact that, well, Modo can handle it, and so can my system, so, well, why not? And go ahead and check out how that hair sculpt looks. And, I mean, just to further articulate the versatility of this, let me check this out. This is just so freaking awesome. Pull this on over here, move tool, render is still running, and I'll just go ahead and drag that on up. And there we go. I can go ahead and reset the render so I can actually see the effect of that hair sculpt inside of the render itself. So you not only get this wonderful context view inside of the viewport, you also get to see it inside the render. And another thing is that curves don't actually hold on to morph data. And that's one thing that you can do here is you can go ahead and create a morph map. Because it's all polygons, and since the curves are constrained to it, it will actually have morph information. And so if I go ahead and create a morph here, go ahead and create that morph, drop the tool, you see nothing's happening, and the reason is I don't want to delete it. I want to add a morph influence, and see once I add that morph influence, it actually respects it. And so that becomes part of my styling. And so your styling can be non-destructive. And that's extremely, extremely useful in hair sculpting workflows, having a non-destructive hair sculpting workflow. It's awesome. And when you're done, you still want to finish off with guides. And that's why our new hair sculpting tools are so useful, because they can handle working on massive sets of guides, 4,000 guides. That's how much I'm planning on having here. And all you have to do is come on over to here. I'll just grab this material. That's the hair hide material, so excuse me. I'll come on down to, sorry, this is what happens when you bring a new file that you're working with into your demos. All right, so I'll grab my fur material. That's going to be for the green. And all I have to do is underneath the fur material, right at the bottom, you see we have that set GL color and display density and stuff. I can modify my display density. And actually, since these are all the furs instances of this original green item, so it'll actually apply to everything. I can bake GL fur to guides. It'll actually create a selection set from that, and look at that. Those are all guides now, and I could go ahead and start editing all of my wonderful guides instead of having to deal with just the clump sets. And so this way you'll have a much easier time being able to go to and from third-party applications, bringing in your guides and stuff like that. So here we go. Come back over to the hair tools. I think this one's the right one that makes sense. And move brush and go ahead and edit all these hair guides. Lots and lots of guides. But this is how you create really complex styles in a manageable way. And this is a workflow that you're only seeing a small portion of this right now, but it's already, in my opinion, so useful. I'm going to kind of start showing some people. So so definitely hop into the forums after this. We'll talk about some of the things you guys saw. I'm really sorry. I think I took up a lot of Q&A time on those last portions there. We're at 1:52, but please, by all means, do you guys have any questions?
Yes, Greg. I see some question here. The first one is, I'm going to try and also send it to you, but it goes like this. Can two distinct fur materials sprout from the same mesh surface?
Yes, because in fact, that scene that you just saw was 15 distinct different fur materials. And so what I just did was I just went ahead and selected the polygons on a surface and reassigned the material, like just to show really quickly, create a plane and subdivide that. And so go ahead and name that 2 and 3. And so we'll go ahead and add a fur material. And check this out, because of instancing, this is what I was talking about before. If you notice that one fur material was managing them all, even though the other materials had a different coloration to them. It's one of the great things about shading instancing inside of Modo. I'll come over here and add a fur material, and then can't really see too well because we need to have a sub-patched mesh, and I also want to increase the length because I don't have any guides presently here. But there you go. We have that fur material, and we'll set the GL color, and we'll just leave that black and white. And I can right-click on this, and I can create an instance. And so if I drop that right there, bang, you can see it just duplicated all those settings. And then I can go in, and I can break the connection by changing the settings on this secondary fur material. So not only can you have the same material, have fur growing on the same surface, multiple different types of fur, you can also reuse your shading information and then go in and add variation iteratively on each section, which is just awesomeness.
Great, Greg. I have two more questions.
Thank you so much for asking. Oh,
I have two more questions.
Yep.
Okay. It goes like this. I'm new to Modo and I would like to create a top-down perspective grass scene. What is your opinion the best way to do it using 801? Using Replicator or the new fur you have demoed?
Okay, so you want to create a grassy field? Because right now I'm trying to, my questions section is not expanding for me. Ah, there we go. Perfect. Top-down perspective grass scene. You know, that's a personal preference thing. It'll probably be easiest for you to do with the fur system because we do have grass presets in our preset browser. And so if I come over here to the preset browser palette and I come on down to my materials and fur, Yazan was so kind to make all these for us when nobody else is willing. You can see you could have a giant sea of anemones if you want to out of our fur. I mean, the fur is really versatile because all of our fur is real polygons and is shaded in the same way as everything else. But here you go. You have grass. And so if I'm going to move this out of the way really quickly and create a plane, and we'll just double-click on this to, go ahead and auto-size that. And now we actually have a fur material, or that is actually grass on top of this surface, which of course you can go ahead and modify the fur material settings in here to increase density, things of that sort. You lower the spacing to increase density and also to alter size. But you can see that it's really quick and easy to create things like grass with the fur. Personally, I'd probably mix fur and replicate it together. I'd probably make clumps to replicate, clumps of grass to replicate around the scene. But if you want a quick and easy way of doing it, the fur material is going to be perfect for you.
Okay, last question.
And by the way, our fur can also have a subsurface.
All right. Last question, Greg. Is there a way to detect self-collisions for soft body dynamics? During the simulation, cloth-like geometry tends to intersect with itself.
Yes, our soft bodies do detect self-collision. However, it is soft bodies and it's not a cloth simulator. I haven't had a lot of luck using, like, say, for instance, a mesh to drop onto a character and have it just become, a shirt that settles onto the character. And that has a lot to do with the bullet physics simulator that we use. It's really not meant for that type of simulation. However, some people have done some really interesting things as far as pinning and weighting clothing onto characters and letting certain other areas drape and fall. But we do have self-collisions. We also have maintained volume. So, for instance, you can kind of get the effect of like a half-filled balloon, where you have those volumes shifting around within that shape, and so you can get some really nice effects with soft bodies. We also have the ability to activate dynamic collisions based on criteria, like the moment an object actually strikes another object. This is the only time that your dynamics become active. So you won't have any trouble with any sort of jiggling, things of that sort, and our dynamics settle extremely well at this point in time. But I would not recommend necessarily using soft bodies for really tough cloth simulations like shirts or jeans or stuff like that. But there are ways to do it. And so if you wanted to start talking about workflows along those lines, we can do that as well.
Greg, throughout the webinar, we have great feedback about your presentation about Modo, so there's a lot of excitement. I have just one more question if you feel like it, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Oh, no, by all means. As many questions as you guys like.
Okay, no, because you were talking about baking too, and it's getting lunchtime, and so.
Oh, no, please. Yeah, okay. Sorry, guys.
Okay. Can you use the shader probes to grow a texture across a set of polys in a mesh? For example, grass expanding along a plane?
Yeah, no, absolutely, no question about it. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could do that. You could define that distance to locator. You could also use the curve probe. There's this awesome video. I mean, okay, if you guys go to our website and you check out all the videos that we have, you will spend definitely more than a half a day watching them all. But Andy Brown did an awesome video using the curve probe with vines growing up a column. And it's a very clever implementation of the tool, and it's really slick. It's like the moment you see it, the vines are growing, the leaves are growing off of it. And again, it's just us kind of playing around, not taking it to its fullest potential. So yeah, you could do that. But if you wanted to have the grass growing across a surface, like across a plane, I probably wouldn't use the curve probe exactly for that. I'd probably use actually use a gradient and like a distance locator as a value, and then modify the distance of that locator to define, where in space it's growing and where I want it to grow from and to.
Greg, how was the speed in 801 compared to 701?
Excellent. Speed is
Excellent.
is really great. Yeah, absolutely. No, the speed is. I keep on hearing from people that for them it's a lot faster than 701. For me, it's about the same. However, deformation speed has been significantly enhanced. Also, just general things like selections and stuff like that in the shader tree for me are extremely quick. And node-based shading, there is a slightly bigger hit with rendering, but because you're adding a little bit of complexity. But that's another thing to point out is our rendering enhancements, which is something almost impossible to show really well in a webinar such as this. Our rendering enhancements, Alan did an amazing job with 801, adding all sorts of extra render enhancements. Like I touched on the idea of, or feature of MC IC hybrid. That's Monte Carlo / irradiance caching hybrid. You can get the look of a physically based renderer, but at the same time while taking advantage of a lot of the speed you find from interpolated global illumination. By combining this, what it does is essentially you turn on this option over here in render called global illumination. See right here, use IC for first and second bounces. You switch that over to second bounce only, and then what it's going to do is it's going to use IC, radiance caching or interpolated GI for the second bounce and any bounces following, and it's going to use Monte Carlo for the first bounce. So this way, when you have an interior with like 20, 25 bounces in it, you're not having to do brute force for every single bounce, and lets you get like gorgeous interior renders a lot faster than you would find in a physically based render, and also with a lot more versatility. And for those of you who do a lot of rendering, I highly suggest you dig into Modo's renderer, because I mean it's just outrageously versatile. Like for instance, I could have a single object in a scene be rendered using Monte Carlo, and the whole rest of the scene rendered using irradiance caching. And I mean, that's really an interesting way of being able to work. And this hybrid rendering option is something that people have been asking for quite some time. And if you get the Spotlight series, which comes with the production evaluation trial, you'll actually get this scene, which briefly, and I'm sorry I didn't go into a lot of depth about our render in this one. I just wanted to show a couple of the new features in 801 as far as rendering is concerned. But we have people like Richard Yacht and Seth and people like that who do amazing interior rendering training, and that's their specialty. But as you can see, this scene right now is actually using MC IC hybrid rendering. And right up here, a good place to kind of show off, right up here in the corner, how well it fills in little areas like this corner. And come over to the render settings, you can see I have 10 bounces here. You can see the scene for a relatively complex interior in the sense that a lot of light is bouncing around, 10 bounces, 1,000 rays, using environment importance sampling with multi-importance sampling, which don't have time to even go into that, but you can ask me about that in the forums, and using second bounce only. Adding extra bounces, because you probably do want like 20 or 25, is almost free using this feature, because now I'm using irradiance caching for it. So throw that on up to 20 bounces, you'll get light spilling and filling in, and there's so many other features in the render engine this time around that let you speed up and let you tune and let you refine. I mean, this render engine, I've used a lot of renderers. This renderer is by far the favorite renderer I've ever used.
Wow, and I know it would take 2 extra webinars to complete.
More like 4 or 5.
Yeah. It's a saga.
It's like looking over, I'm like, oh, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, I've got like probably about 20, 30 minutes left, and I look over, and it's like it's 1:40, and I'm like, oh, there I go again. Yeah,
Well,
but yeah,
well,
by all means.
it's good to know that, people like a Modo can explore on their own time then and, be surprised and, you definitely over delivering with this one. So everybody's very excited. Thank you so much, Greg. I'm going to go back to take the screen. I'm going to take over the screen, go back to my slide. And
Absolutely.
I'm going to conclude the presentation. I want to thank you so much. This was fantastic. I'm particularly impressed by the Soothsayer tool. And
Oh.
I'm glad to know. I'm glad I'm not the only one thinking a new Seuss movies do. So
Yeah, there should be a campaign for the new whatever new future Seuss movie, because eventually there probably will be one. Who
and it
knows?
will be done in Modo.
Yeah, why
Now.
not? I mean, these are our hair tools. And hey, if you guys want to do a Seuss movie, somebody's doing one, give me a call. I'll walk you through all my tips and tricks.
We'll lobby for it for sure. Anyway, thank you so much for participating. If you are interested in Modo, please come to our website. And I have it from Greg himself that Modo on our website is even cheaper than the one they sell on at the Foundry. So
Yeah,
we
it's a
have.
good deal. I think I saw 14.19 up there, something like
I
that.
know
It's pretty
yeah.
sweet.
Yeah, it's really, unbeatable prices. So thank you so much. And if you
And
live outside, yes,
oh, hop into our forums really quickly,
yes,
just to show you guys. By all means, hop on the blog here at Novedge and check out, and ask them questions. I'll answer them. I'll put them on the blog. But also come over here to community.thefoundry.co.uk/discussion. And if you come down here to the Modo discussion, I'll go ahead and start up a thread right after this about the Novedge webinar. You can hop in here. You can ask questions. I'll try and answer them, or somebody much smarter than me will. So there we go. Thanks so much,
well,
guys.
thank you. That's very generous of you, Greg. Your dedication goes beyond our webinar, so that's fantastic. So yeah, you know where to find it. You know where to find us. We're on all the social media, Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and we have a fabulous blog where we have great interviews, and it's a great tool to find out about all the latest special and promos. Every Monday we come out with all the best deals of the week, so come visit us. Coming up next week, creating a building without walls in Vectorworks. Design the buildings you want by modeling with Vectorworks 2014. And last but not least, if you missed something, feel free to go to our Vimeo and YouTube channel and rewatch all today's and all the other webinars that we've been recording for months now. So come join our community and our network anytime. And it was great presenting this webinar with Greg. And bye, everybody. Bye, Greg. Thank you so much. And it was
Bye.
great
Thanks, guys.
spending some time online with you. Thank you.